there, it's Dr. Vyvyane Loh, and this is my live stream Q&A session. And I'm looking forward to meeting all of you and hearing from you, seeing if you have any questions from previous episodes. And I will say the episode that I just dropped, which was on LDL and atherosclerosis, just talking about the link there. That one, I've gotten a lot of questions and requests for further episodes, so I can see the interest there. And that's a good thing, because what I've decided to do is just take the whole topic of atherosclerosis. Those of you who've watched previous episodes, you know me, like my old, sort of way of doing this would have been to take an hour and a half of material and just throw it onto the episode. And I've just learned from your feedback, so thank you very much, to just kind of maybe spread things out a little bit because it can get very dense. So I certainly understand that. So that's what I'm trying to do. It is a major topic, as you all can see. It's a super, super complex topic. And then I thought, okay, this is great, perfect. We should not like try to overload one episode, but take various segments and spread it out over quite a few, I think 4 or 5 episodes, something in that range, right? So then at the end of that, at the end of the 4 or 5 episodes, we can step back and take a panoramic view, if you will. And hopefully by then, it will be a lot clearer to you what we're actually dealing with when we are, talking about the atherosclerotic process, okay? And if you're listening in or checking in on the live stream, I'd love to see your comments. So feel free to put your comments down in the chat box and I'll be able to see them. I'd like to know who's joining in. And if you have questions for me, it doesn't have to be about atherosclerosis. I know I said I would kind of elaborate a little bit more in this live stream, but do feel free if there are other topics that you want me to kind of clarify. I'm happy to do that as well, okay? So if you're there, then make sure you put your comments in so I can see it. And then one other thing, just very quickly, because I might forget, we usually start a little later. We start at 5:30 and then we go for an hour. And I know I'm starting at 5, so it's about half hour earlier. And then I'm going to go for 45 minutes and then I have to run. And that's because I have to go somewhere else and give a talk. So trying to cram everything in, I have to make sure I give myself enough time to battle the traffic and find parking at the other end. So I'm just going to make this about 45 minutes and, wrap it up and then get out of here. All right. So let's see. I will just kind of talk a little bit about that last episode. And again, please feel free, chime in, put your comments in, questions, anything like that. All right. And I had been discussing LDL and what really matters when we look at LDL in the context of atherosclerosis. And in that episode, as you all know by now, I really focus on the antigenic effect of, the antigenic effect of the LDLs, right? So basically, what we're talking about is that now the processing of the LDL by your immune cells is such that they recognize it as something that is a danger to your body. And it's a very specific immune signal, right? It's a specific immune signal, even in the sense of the innate immune system. It's a specific immune signal. And this translates downstream from the innate system into the adaptive system, where now it becomes an antigen, all right? So that was really what I spoke about in the episode. And then the other thing I didn't actually put in there is that Really, the entire field of atherosclerosis research has been going in that direction for years, really decades, right? So it may be new to some people, but it's really been going in that direction. And if you look at where the research has been going, they've been looking for vaccines against atherosclerosis. So the recognition that the immune part of atherosclerosis is so strong, right, that it's causal, is such that now well, for at least the last decade, there's been, kind of forays into looking at getting vaccines made against these antigens and so forth. So, you can see it's not just speculative. Pharma is well aware, and that's why the interest has been there to try to develop that kind of approach to atherosclerosis. All right. And by the way, I just wanted to know if you're listening in, again, put it in the chat so I know where you're listening from and whether you had even heard that episode that I'm just going on about right now, or if there's some other episode that you maybe want to chat with me about or have me clarify something about. Okay. But back to the LDL and the atherosclerosis, there were parts there. I didn't get a chance. I was trying very hard to keep the episode under 30 minutes. I got to 35. So, okay, not bad for first effort there, right? And if you listen carefully, you might see that under certain circumstances, we were creating antibodies that were protective. And then under different circumstances, we were creating antibodies that were pro-inflammatory and, kind of accelerated the disease process, right? So, and that's why it's so complex. When they have been working to develop vaccines um, against atherosclerosis, this was one of the hurdles they came across, that under one set of conditions, we have protective antibodies against oxidized LDL, right? And then under certain other circumstances, they're actually more pro-inflammatory. So there was a bit of confusion there. And I mentioned this, I didn't go into detail. I was trying really hard not to go into detail in the actual episode. The different immunoglobulins that are involved, the different uh, classes of immunoglobulins. So by that, I mean the different classes of antibodies that are involved kind of inform whether this is going to be a protective function or whether we're going to see a more pro-inflammatory function. All right. So that part, again, didn't get a chance. There were so many things I really didn't get a chance to go into, but I thought, I have a little bit of time here now in this format, and thought maybe then I would talk about that. So if you really want to know the details, when it's IgM, right, those tend to be protective, right? The IgM antibodies or immunoglobulins. And then we see in different circumstances, we may see class switching and we get IgG. And it's different IgGs, IgG1, IgG3, particularly those immunoglobulins that tend to form complexes, soluble immune complexes that set up a pro-inflammatory sort of environment. So again, I'm trying not to be too technical here, but I just want to bring that up for the purpose of just demonstrating that we're really talking about a very complex immune reaction here, right? And so all the simplistic, it's inflammatory, it's anti-inflammatory. I always like cringe a little when I hear that kind of language. As I emphasized in the episode, there's no such thing. At every point in time, you have various degrees of inflammation and various degrees of anti-inflammation in your body, and it's dependent on the context of the tissue, the time of day, the exposure to the environment, and so forth. So that kind of balance is happening, and your body is managing that day in, day out. So it's really hard, to the extent that even when they're trying to design these vaccines now, that they know that actually we are dealing with neoantigens, yeah, in the form of the oxidized or modified LDLs. Even knowing that, it's hard to actually target, target the immune system in such a way that we are going to have a protective effect only, right? So again, I hope that was clear, because one thing I worry about a lot when I see people try to discuss or explain different phenomena in the body, doesn't have to be atherosclerosis, but just what goes on in your body, nutrient partitioning and things like that. What I tend to see is a very polarized view, and usually we leave out a big part of the picture. We pick one thing in the science that we read, and then we only emphasize that, and we ignore all the other aspects, right? And so you just end up with, like, it's almost like a caricature. You have just the extremes, and that's just not how your body functions. Okay, so as I said, in the next few weeks, I'm going to take all different parts of the puzzle and try to put them together. And what do I mean by that? I think there are lots of questions that we've asked ourselves, and also listening in on conversations when people are discussing atherosclerosis, right? Uh, the question of what is happening with LDL, what's happening with LDL cholesterol. So, for example, the cholesterol I emphasized in episode 45, it's not necessarily primary. And then immediately people go, see, it's not cholesterol at all. Okay. And I can understand that. That's probably a natural reaction, right? But the point is, it does have a role. Cholesterol does have a role. And it can play into the immune system, right? But is cholesterol, the main inciting event? And I really don't think it is. But it does have a role, and it's an important role, and that's what makes the whole problem so complex, right? So one part that I'm going to present and talk about in the upcoming episodes is actually talk about the role of cholesterol, right? If I spent episode 45 telling you, oh, it's really the vehicle, which is the LDL, the antigen, and not the cargo, which in this case would be the cholesterol. Then what role does cholesterol have? And rather than jump to the conclusion it has zero roles, let me show you the roles, okay? And again, once you see the whole picture, you'll see, oh, okay, it makes a lot of sense. So there's that. Then I think people have asked the question before in the past, if you all remember, what when the particles and immune cells get into the wall of your artery, is it from the lining of the blood vessels or the back end, the back side of the blood vessel, the tissue end, and not the blood, stream end, the lumen end. So that question has kind of been floating around as well. And people have, again, strong feelings about whether it's coming from the back end or from the front end, whichever end you decide to call front and back. And what's the real answer, and why? Why is always more important to me, because I like to understand the process. So I'm pretty sure I have a good why as well that will fit into this picture, right? So that's another piece of the puzzle that I want to bring forth. And then I got a very interesting comment on YouTube, which all of you who have been participating in the conversation on YouTube, thank you so much. I enjoy that. I always love, like, discussing it with intelligent, curious-minded people. And so I had a comment that asked me about, What about the thrombosis aspect, right? That has been floating around as well. That's yet another, hypothesis that has been floating around. How does that fit in? And yes, it perfectly fits in the picture too once I show it to you. Okay. So I think it's going to be fun for me in the next few episodes because I get to take all these pieces that have been floating around, and I've spent years listening to different sides of it and actually kind of put it into an integrated whole. And like I said, have you step back now from, a much higher viewpoint, get a panoramic view of the disease process, and hopefully then it will be much clearer to you what's going on in your body. All right. So that's the whole intent of the next few episodes. And I want to also point out that if you look back on previous episodes, some of you have been kind enough in the comments also to point that out, that I did do some extensive foundation laying. So you heard me do a whole episode on lipoproteins, on the glycocalyx. I did a few episodes on the immune system. And even then, I tried to stay very surface, but there are certain things that we have to kind of be on the same page on before we dive into pathogenesis, disease process, right? If we don't understand the players and what they're there for and what they're doing, it's really going to be fuzzy when we're actually delving into the disease process. So I laid out all those episodes. Feel free to go back and listen in on them. But there was a certain sort of strategy there, a certain method to my madness, okay? Because sometimes people are like, oh, where's she going with this? We're talking about this, we're talking about that, we're going down here and over there, right? And it's because if we want to see the whole picture, we have to really understand, all these different aspects and also get on the same page. So we're talking the same language. That's the big thing, because a lot of times people get so excited about what they're talking about, and at some point they don't realize or forget that maybe someone else is not saying the same thing, right? And some of the things sound the same or sound similar or may have some overlap, but then we're not quite discussing the same thing, right? So that's another reason that I wanted to do that. Okay, I don't know if there are any comments or if people have anything that they want to ask me. Let me keep an eye on the time because, again, I don't want to be late for my appointment. Um, yeah, I think that was mostly what I wanted to say. Those are the big things that I left out. The fact that we are now looking at least in pharma world, the immune aspects very strongly, looking for a vaccine, and also looking at a way to, um, let's say, interfere or intervene with some of the immune signaling. Okay, so for example, we know that interleukin 6, which is a inflammatory cytokine, so it's one of these signals that immune cells send out. And we know that interleukin 6 is very much implicated in atherosclerosis. Okay. So, a lot of the research and the trials that have gone on have involved, sort of blocking interleukin 6 in one way or another. So, again, the focus has really been primarily on the immune system. Yeah. I think there's still some play with the cholesterol, um, because it's quite profitable. Um, so until we find a way to deal with the immune system, that's probably going to be the workhorse, right? That will flog for a while. So I think that's what it seems like. But actually, behind the scenes, all the work is now focused on inflammation and dealing with the immune system and targeting different immune cells and different parts of the immune response, like the signaling and so forth. Okay. And developing a vaccine. So this really kind of highlights that we've known for a very long time. Some of these papers that I reference in the in that episode and that I will be referencing in future episodes, I have deliberately chosen some of the older papers to kind of highlight how long ago this information was already available and sort of, buried a little bit, kept hush hush, right? Because none of this is that new, really. A lot of the inflammatory response in atherosclerosis, you'll see, I already told you in the 90s, the late 90s, we already had indications of what was going on. And then if you go into the early 2000s, a lot of papers there were spot on. um, and because we got lots of smart people around, right? So this was starting to be very obvious. But did we hear about it, right? Did the medical world hear about it? No. uh, why? Because at least in the medical world there was no way to act upon it in the form of medication. And in the medical world, we just act upon disease purely in the form of medication, really, and or surgery, right? So there's no other intervention. For example, we rarely use nutrition. We rarely use lifestyle practices, even though we admit that those make the biggest difference. We don't use them in our system, right? So the only way we intervene generally is through drugs, procedures, and devices, right? So even though this information was, I think, quite obvious um, a very long time ago, there's no incentive, and also that's not how your medical system functions. So that's why nobody's acted on it. Okay. I mean, the only people, as I said, acting on it are pharma because they have, a huge incentive to act upon it. So sad, but I have to say that's why I think we're at this point. Yeah, because otherwise, it's inconceivable to me that this information has been around for so long, and then like we don't even know about it today. I mean, it's rarely clarified or, you know, extrapolated on. I mean, we always use this. This is the thing that always annoyed me. Inflammation. I hate the generic term inflammation because when someone just, it's kind of like you don't know what to say and you throw the word inflammation and then you're always going to get a nod from someone, right? And everybody goes, yeah, inflammation. And I'm just like, what part of inflammation are we talking about, right? What inflammatory responses can we be specific? Because that's like saying, that's life, right? C'est la vie, it's life. Well, life has many components. So, can we define what aspects of life we're talking about? What specific parts of life we're talking about? Right? So we know that if we were to say, "Oh, it's just life," it's a very generic way, and maybe because we don't have a real explanation, right? And I think we use that term with inflammation, anti-inflammation, and it's easy because it's black or white, right? And but that's not how your body works, or you would not be alive. Today your body's way more complex and a lot more intelligent than that. So I think, yeah, really having people see the different aspects of inflammation for me, that's important, right? That's important not just for the general public, for patients, but also for the medical world to understand, and to not just look at it in terms of polarities, right? Because a lot of times you'll have practitioners react and they'll say, oh, we have to calm the inflammation, so make everything anti-inflammatory. And I've said this before, I mean, really the extreme of that is when you lose your tumor surveillance and you have immunosuppression, right? And we know that's bad. So why should that be a goal? And the extreme, you don't want, pro-inflammatory reactions all the time, right? Um, And it's not even like getting it in the middle, as if there were a dial. It's the fact that it's a net effect. There's always going to be inflammation and there's always going to be anti inflammation at the same time, occurring right now, even as I speak, right? And then what's the net in the different tissues at any point in time? Really, that's what's going on. And when you intervene with one side, right, that you might not be getting the reaction you want, right? So if you're dialing towards a more anti-inflammatory effect, it might actually, in some cases, right, rev up more inflammation in different ways. So, thinking of it just as polarities and oh, we're here or we're here, not probably not the best way to look at your immune system. Okay. And, the other fun thing I think that will happen is I get to do a little bit, very little, but we'll get to do a little bit of immunometabolism in the upcoming episodes, right? So I've always said that I want to, talk about immunometabolism and never got a chance. Always there's just always so many topics, and but in putting all of this together in this big picture of atherosclerosis, we will have to do a little bit of immunometabolism. So I'm looking forward to that. So finally, I get to at least discuss it in a small way on the podcast. Okay. So that should be a lot of fun. And then I get to feature my favorite immune cells also a lot more. And most of you know that that would be my favorite macrophages. And for heads up, if people want to, I've said this many times on the different episodes. Uh, and I've said it because these cells are important in many disease processes. I was going to say in atherosclerosis, but I really in many, many disease processes. So I did a talk, so it has slides and everything, which is why I refer to it because sometimes it's good for people to have the visual. And it's called the Magical Mystery Macrophage Tour. Now, I will refer back to some aspects of macrophages from that talk. You don't have to remember the talk, but it might be a good idea if you just kind of want to preview what's ahead to listen to that talk. It was, kind of for a general public, and I really dialed it down. We only discuss one aspect of macrophages, really. We only really describe the eating capacity, right? What we call the phagocytic capacity. So, how well these cells function in terms of gobbling up debris and gobbling up other cells or gobbling up bacteria, for example. So, really only focus on that. And the macrophages clearly do a whole range of other things, some pretty fantastic things, but that was all I focused on in that episode. But I think it's still worth looking at just to get a view because I will go back and dive back into now really the specific macrophages that are involved with atherosclerosis. So you can see I'm kind of building up to this whole topic on atherosclerosis. Okay, I don't know if there are comments and if people were able to get this link on time. I had some problems with getting the link up on LinkedIn because I couldn't integrate it for some reason. And of course, these few days I've just been running around, a lot going on for me. So it was hard to kind of figure out the technical details there. But hopefully, if you're able to watch it on replay, um, that maybe you got some of the details that I left out in that episode 45. So it's a little bit cheating because I was trying to get that episode, as I said, down to 30 minutes. And then at the back of my head, I knew I had this Q&A coming and I thought, oh, I can put this detail in there. I can add that part in there. And so I kind of, it gave me a chance to lump a few more things in, because otherwise the episode would have been longer. So we'll see how we do. I'm about to this weekend film the next one. Um, and I'm actually more concerned about the time. I can't tell you how stressed I was filming that. I actually did two two takes. And the first take was 40, I think it was over 40 minutes. And I was like, oh, can't face my friends, because I had told them the week before, watch, I'm getting this 30 minutes. And it was late at night. And I actually decided, okay, the next day, just do it again. Okay, gotta get it to the 30-minute mark. So I actually redid it and cut out a whole chunk. So the biggest stress for me was like trying to remember what I had to say, what parts I should leave out, look at the clock, time's going, right? And that was really stressful. So good to see Jean and Maya. Thank you for joining me. I started a little early today just because I have to leave a little early. I have to go give a talk somewhere else. So I need to get my car and drive and get parking. So we're I plan to start at 5 and then leave at 5:45. But I'm so glad that both of you are here, and I just spent the time kind of filling people in on the bits that I left out from episode 45, which was the episode on the LDL and the atherosclerosis, right? Checking to see if I have messages here. So kind of all the things that I had to leave out, I thought I'd throw in here. Like I said, I was cheating a little bit. But I don't know if you had a chance. I know, Maya, you've been very busy, so probably you haven't had a chance but to see that episode. But I was really trying to start a series where I'm going to kind of put together this big picture on the immune aspects of atherosclerosis and tie up all the big questions, the puzzles, the parts that never fit and nobody could figure out, right? I just want to tie it up and have people have a good panoramic view, okay, of the situation. So, but in the meanwhile, since both of you are here, do you have any questions for me? Anything you want to kind of chime in on, or maybe other episodes? I think I did the one before that. I did on green tea, I think. Yeah, and somewhere in there, I did a ginger episode. That was mostly requests from friends who wanted to know about, different nutrients in ginger and so forth. Um, and then I don't remember what other episodes I did because, it goes by so quickly. My week goes by so quickly, and I just feel like, okay, wasn't that a while ago? Whatever episode that was. So, if you have any questions or comments or anything else you want to chime in on, be great to hear from you. How do I store my old tea? Oh, good one. Um, Put it in an airtight container, Jean, and I keep it really in a very dark and cool place as much as possible. I mentioned in the episode on the tea that I have my grandmother's, pour from 1945. And that one, she was very smart. She kept it in a cool jar, um, it really in a dark place. Yeah. So it was, I think, very well kept. So when I got it, I didn't keep the jar. I transferred it to another container, but I made sure that it was properly airtight and sealed. And I also made sure it was away from the light and that it was in a cool place because that will disturb, especially the pu'er teas. They're quite delicate, and as I said, it will take on the smells. Let's say you have it in the kitchen, and you're cooking a lot, and the smells of the food, the tea can absorb, right? So I just want to make sure that I keep it away from areas that have strong smells. And then, like I said, that airtight jar is helpful as well. So, yeah, that's how I store my old teas. I don't have a lot of very old teas. And, like I said, this one that my grandmother gave me, I really treasure it. Refrigerating is a very good idea, Jean, I think. I think that some people, just like you see, people have wine cellars and they have built these specially kind of climate controlled rooms for their wine, right? There are some serious collectors that actually have entire rooms where everything is climate controlled, humidity and everything, and they make sure that they have their tea stored properly. The only thing I will say about putting it in your fridge is, again, you just want to make sure it's properly sealed, because in the fridge usually there's food, right? And you just want to be careful about the smells and the scents. So you just have to make sure every time when you drink your tea, you seal it properly before you place it in the fridge. Or if you have a spare like little fridge somewhere, maybe it just makes ice or something, you might want to use that one. But if it's a fridge where you store food, I do I just am very particular about the smell. Yeah, so I think refrigerating is a good idea. And I think, I don't know if you probably know this, Jean, but those teas cost a lot of money, right? So you can have a very good pour that's like 100 grams, just tiny amount, and that goes for $250,000, right? Depending on the year and whose collection it comes from and all that. So yeah, I try to take care of whatever teas I have. Um, what brand of yogurt do I prefer or recommend? So so in the Boston area, there actually are some more like the mom and pop stores that sell local made yogurt. So I like to use their yogurt, and I just go to the store and they actually make it themselves. So I like to do that. I haven't gotten to the point where I'm making my own yogurt. I think that would take a long time, and I'd probably mess it up, right? So I just go and get it, and I can give you the reference, Maya, because it's in the Boston area. And then cottage cheese. Cottage cheese. You said any thoughts on cottage cheese? I mean, I don't have any specific thoughts on cottage cheese. If you like it, it's fine. I do think I think cheese is a good source of protein, right? And if people like cheese, I like cheese. I can't say I love cheese, but if you like it, I would encourage you eat it. And Michael is asking, HDL can either be anti-inflammatory or pro-inflammatory, correct? Is this also true of LDL? Yes. So the whole point of the episode I just did is, if you think about it, your body makes LDL, right? So it's endogenous to your body. In other words, it should be fine because it's part of your body. But if we modify the LDL, and now your immune cells cannot recognize it as being part of your body, coming from you, now it's pro inflammatory, because at this point, it's going to be seen as a pathogen, an invader of some kind, right? So, the whole point of the episode that I just did is to point out that the LDL particle itself, when modified, can be seen as an invader, and down the road as an antigen, and an antigen that will now really kind of provoke an immune response, and then your immune cells go after it, and that would be obviously a pro-inflammatory response. So yes, uh, the LDL can be neutral, or it can be uh, pro-inflammatory. With regards to the HDL2, the main thing I want to say is now with HDL, we don't, the way we are researching HDL now, we're very interested in what is called the proteome. Yeah, the proteome. In other words, which proteins are involved in the HDL. That's way more important in classifying the HDL than anything else. We used to say, oh, certain density, does certain size, and thrown that out the window now. We realize, ooh, no, no, no. What's really important is the proteome. And so you see now there is ongoing sort of collaboration, and there's a proteome, HDL proteome bank that researchers have built, and whatever proteins you find, you contribute to the bank so that all researchers around the world can understand HDL better, because we don't even know what we were studying before, right? Some of the methods to define HDL were kind of not very good. Let's just put it that way, right? So now what we have done is we realized that we really should be looking at the proteins involved, because that defines the HDL, and it defines whether it has a more anti-inflammatory role or an inflammatory role, right? And then Jean said, can I do an episode on autoimmune disease? Well, you are in luck, Jean. The reason is that if you listen in on the episode very carefully, the one I just did, I said, this means that atherosclerosis is an autoimmune disease, okay? And obviously, I'm not going to leave you hanging, right? It's an autoimmune disease, so I'm going to have to show you, right? And I'm going to have to verify that for you. So that's what these upcoming episodes will be about. That I'm going to, now I made this big declaration, yes, and now I'm going to fill in the blanks for you, and I'm going to explain all, like the cholesterol. What's the cholesterol doing? Is it really like not important? It's not prime, but does it have a role? Yes. And I will tell you specifically what that role is, right? So, and there are other aspects, like what about the thrombosis aspect, and how does that fit in? And I'm just going to pull all of this together because I've just made this big statement. It's an autoimmune disease, okay? Because we modified the LDL. Now it becomes something unrecognizable to your body. So your body sees it as a neoantigen. It's called a neoantigen because you didn't have this antigen before, because your normal LDL was seen as part of you, normal. But now it's modified. So now all of a sudden it's new and I don't recognize it. And we call it a neoantigen. And this neoantigen was formed from your own body, right? So your immune cells will start to attack it, but it was formed from your own body. That's why we call it an autoimmune disease, right? So, really what we're saying is that atherosclerosis in the end is an autoimmune disease. And there's a lot of literature on lipoproteins and autoimmune diseases. I don't even want to go in there because that will be a whole nother 4 or 5 like mega series. But, I'm just trying to focus on atherosclerosis and trying to tie up 4 or 5 episodes together to explain that, right? An episode on nutrition aspects of protein. Yeah, I did try a little bit to kind of look at, let's say, branched chain amino acids and so forth. But yeah, we can definitely do that. Um, Let me finish off this whole atherosclerosis series. Kind of think of it like an opera, like a Wagner opera, the Ring series. So it's going to be like this massive tome spread out over 5 episodes or something like that. I have to get through that, but I really kind of want to make sure people understand this, because I just, it's, I just think that a lot of the discourse around atherosclerosis is kind of off track, shall we say? Okay, so yeah, those are what would be coming up. So yeah, I'm looking at the time and it's very close to 45 minutes. So I am going to have to run. And I am so glad that all of you joined in. I'm really grateful. that you've been watching and listening and that you have your questions. I really love the questions. I just want to emphasize the comments that I got on episode 45 were really heartwarming to me because it's nice to see that other people care about a topic that I care about too. It's a lot of fun, yeah, to kind of engage with people and have a good discussion with curious minded, very intelligent people. So I very much appreciate that. I hope you guys, all of you, will continue to do that. Give me some suggestions. Give me feedback. Am I going too fast? Is it too slow? Is it too boring? I am always happy to kind of learn from all of you and adjust. Right. So let me know, and I hope that the next few episodes will be interesting for you. Okay. Having said that, I think I better run. I have to get across town and find parking before I give this talk to the group that I'm meeting. Okay. So big hug to all of you. Thank you so much for joining me again, and I'll see you next time. Bye.